Low risk, high reward players that you should be buying right now before it is too late, before their value skyrockets, before this situation changes, and specifically before the NFL draft, specifically before the NFL free agency market officially opens. These are some players I want to get on my team before it is too late. So let's get straight into the video. Before I get into my first player, I just want to say a huge thank you to the community that has been showing up so much love for myself, for my family, for our new addition to our family, Brooklyn Love. Appreciate each and every one of you. And if I haven't said thank you or responded to your comments or whatever the case may be, just want to say in this video, I appreciate you. It's out there. Thank you so much for the love as always. But let's get straight into the video. My first low risk, high reward player that you should be trying to acquire for your dynasty team before, once again, the NFL draft or free agency is Jahan Dotson. Now, Jahan Dotson was one of my guys going into the 2023 season. I'm pretty sure he was a lot of people's mind guys in the fantasy community going into this year as well. And that just wasn't the case. That just didn't happen. He was completely non-existent in this offense. Maybe that was the case of bad quarterback play. Maybe that was the case of bad coaching, or the case of Curtis Samuel, what we like to call him, the cock blocker for Jahan Dotson. It just wasn't there for him, right? 49 receptions, 83 targets, just over 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, finished as a wide receiver 56 this past year. It was extremely, extremely frustrating. But look, Jahan Dotson does have the history of being a first-round pick. In 2022, he was a top 16 pick in the NFL draft. Granted, it was completely a different head coach. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, head coach, GM, and so on and so forth. Completely different regime. But look, the past 2 years, the quarterback play has also been terrible. Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, Jacoby Brissett, and Sam Howell. Granted, Sam Howell did have a good first half of the season, and then, I mean, respectfully, went to shit, right? He just wasn't the guy. We was like, okay, Sam Howell. I think he was like a top 6 quarterback from weeks like 1 to 7 or 1 to 6. And it just completely fell off from Sam Howell. I think there was a lot of injuries on the offensive line. A lot of things weren't clicking. But in my personal opinion, there is hope. There is hope for someone like a Jahan Dotson in 2024. And that's because it's a complete wipe of the organization. A new GM, a new front office, some new weapons, right? Everything is going to happen. Dan Quinn is a new head coach of this team, which is going to be very defensive heavy. But also they hired Cliff Kingsbury, who was going to be, if I'm not mistaken, on the Raiders. And then he pulls out to go to Washington. Why? Because they have a top pick, a top 3, top 2 pick in the NFL draft here. Now, before we get into that part, let me just give you some hope and belief behind Cliff Kingsbury, because we've seen him with multiple wide receivers and be successful in that range. You're saying, oh, well, Jahan Dotson has Terry. He's behind Terry. He's going to be the wide receiver too. I get it. But we've seen that success with, DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown when Cliff was with the Arizona Cardinals. We've even seen at a very minuscule level with Cliff Kingsbury being at USC this past year with Caleb Williams. He had Taj Washington and Brendan Rice. Now, those guys are not superstars. Those are some level, wide receiver 3 on some teams, right, that's going to be going into the draft. Maybe they go undrafted. Maybe they are late round draft picks. But still, we've seen Caleb Williams spread the ball around to this offense and to these players with Cliff Kingsbury play calling. And it's going to change going into the 2024 season. And hopefully be the same way going into the 2024 season, because of the future quarterback that this team could potentially be acquiring going into this NFL draft. The future quarterback of this team, once again, they do have a top 2 pick. And whether they move up to the first pick to pick up Caleb Williams, what if they draft Jaden Daniels out of LSU or Drake May? We've seen those guys spread the ball around as well. What if it's Jaden Daniels? We've seen the success who Jaden Daniels has 2 top 15 wide receivers going into the NFL draft with Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors, right? So the ball could be spread around with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. And I think this is what's exciting. And this is why I truly believe you should be trying to acquire them or acquire Jahan Dotson, before the NFL draft or before the free agency market, because that's where these teams start to open up and move forward and push and trade in the NFL draft. What if What if Washington wants to swap with the Bears? And you know they're going to get Caleb Williams at the 101. Doesn't that instantly raise Jahan Dotson's value, where you probably could have gotten him for significantly cheaper? This is why this is a low risk, high reward type move at this moment, if you can get it done as soon as possible. So let's get straight into that value. According to Keep Trade Cut, he was wide receiver 49. According to our Flock Fantasy website, wide receiver 45, right? You can see a graphic here. Jahan Dotson for a mid to late second round pick. According to our community rankings, it says you're robbing them if you were to be acquiring that 24 second. That's it, crazy, right? You see here, Keep Trade Cut. You send Jahan Dotson and you receive the 208. That's a fair trade. Now, yes, Zach and I have been saying you should be getting into the second round of this draft. But if you're telling me a wide receiver 2 on this team that's going to be getting a quote unquote, a top caliber quarterback that they haven't seen in years, since I would say RG3, this is what you want, right? Maybe that person paid for Jahan Dotson for a late first, like I did last year. I bought Jahan Dotson from the 111, the 112, the 110 from multiple leagues last year, and that just didn't pay off. But if you're telling me I can go ahead and buy Jahan Dotson right now for somebody that's completely gave up and is giving up on Jahan Dotson, I'll be doing it if I can send the 208, the 209, the 207 for him right now. Guys, this is a low risk, high reward type move that is not really going to affect you. If Jahan Dotson, doesn't pan out, it's probably because he probably wasn't the guy, but at least you tried and spent a low cost on him for a late second round pick, which probably would have been maybe a second string running back potentially, or maybe a second string wide receiver. Yes, those guys could potentially skyrocket, or the NFL draft can jumble things up, and all these guys that we were hoping to go, like at the moment, Roman Wilson is projected to go in the late second. He's probably going to be rising here very soon, right? I've seen Xavier Legette, who I personally like. We've seen him go in the late second. What if that's a Trey Benson or Jonathan Brooks, and they don't get the landing spot that we were hoping and expecting? Jahan Dotson instantly changes that value because of that quarterback play, because of that new head coach, because of that new offensive coordinator. Once again, guys, low risk, high reward. If you can go out and buy Jahan Dotson right now for a mid to late second, I would do it right now. All right, my second low risk, high reward type of player, and I don't think a lot of people are going to like this, but I do believe there's some upside here if scenarios do work out. But at the same time, once again, a low risk, high reward, and that is Wan'Dale Robinson. I know it's not a sexy name. I know the Giants really feel cursed at the wide receiver position. Trust me, I am a Giants fan. I understand this. But look, low risk, high reward. While the Giants do have the 6th pick in the NFL draft, there are rumors that they could potentially be moving up in the NFL draft, right? Let's go through that scenario, right? If the Giants do move to the top 3 picks, maybe they get a Jaden Daniels, a Drake May, a Caleb Williams, that instantly raises that value for Wan'Dale Robinson. Why? Because that means they're not drafting a wide receiver in the first round, which leads me to my second scenario. With that second scenario is that they stay put at the 106, right? And they take Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. And then Wan'Dale Robinson becomes the wide receiver 2 with Daniel Jones being the quarterback. Or do they go out and get a Bo Nix in the second half, or in the second half of the NFL draft, or in the early second if he does fall, right? Do they trade up into the second round or into the first round in the back end there? A lot of things could potentially happen when it comes down to the quarterback play here for Wan'Dale Robinson. But just because you bring in Malik Neighbors, I don't think, and I do agree, Malik Neighbors, a great generational talent who's elite. He's my wide receiver 2 behind Marvin Harrison Jr., easily demands 100+ targets without a doubt. But we've seen how Wan'Dale Robinson can come and change this offense playing in the slot wide receiver position, where he can be of value here. Because, look, this past year, it's not exciting, right? It's not exciting whatsoever, but he was second in targets behind Darius Slayton, who by 1 target, by the way, and Wan'Dale Robinson did miss 2 games. You also had to remember that Wan'Dale Robinson is their first offensive weapon that Joe Shane and Brian Dable did draft in 2 years ago now, and Wan'Dale Robinson tore his ACL his rookie year, where we saw him have his breakout game and then gets injured. That's going to change. I know it's not exciting, but look, this is why low risk, high reward. You need to take some gambles. And this is a video I want to see. Look, it's not exciting, but if you wanted to gamble on a wide receiver, that CeeDee Lamb said this, by the way.
You know who's really a sleeper, though? Wan'Dale Robinson from New York. He's so fast, but he's so nice. His routes is crazy.
Why not go and try and acquire him, right? There is hope. He's a fantastic route runner. He gets separation. He just had the injuries. Doesn't have the quarterback play. If you tell him he gets that quarterback play and they move up, now, there's a lot of and, ifs, or buts in this scenario, no question about it. But you can easily right now send a mid to late third for Wan'Dale Robinson if they do move up. And once again, if that NFL draft does come around and they do trade up and you're trying to acquire Wan'Dale Robinson, I guarantee you somebody's going to be looking for a mid-second, because who else is going to be on this team? T. Higgins is not a free agent because they franchise tagged him. There's a lot of rumors that Michael Pittman is going to be getting that contract extension, or they could be using the franchise tag on Michael Pittman. The wide receiver room, when you think about it, in the offseason is not the best, but the wide receiver class in 2024 is phenomenal. But if they don't have that top 6 pick and they move it for a quarterback, that could be where my answer, that Wan'Dale Robinson could be the number 1 wide receiver or number 2 behind quote-unquote Jalen Hyatt, however way you view him on this team. He's currently the wide receiver 62 on Keep Trade Cut and the wide receiver 55 in the community. Once again, if you can go out and spend a low risk, high reward type of pick to acquire Wan'Dale Robinson, and those scenarios do happen, that's okay. You get a flex player at worst. You potentially get a low end wide receiver too, even with that elite quarterback play, and that's really high. That's me being really optimistic and not giving him praise. Low end wide receiver 2 with Caleb Williams. Maybe that can bump up even more if it was Caleb Williams, if it was Drake May, if it was Jaden Daniels. All those things can change here. So Wan'Dale Robinson is my next player. Before I get into my third player, guys, go to flogfantasy.com, the best place to support what Zach and I are doing here. If you want to unlock so much, as you can see on your screen here, this is exactly what you could potentially be getting: a 2024 rookie report, Dynasty team reviews, premium trade calculator, a personal DM with Zach and myself, and so much more, guys. And we are releasing version 3 of our rookie report. As you can see here, a preview of Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's only going to get better and better with version 3. We're going to be updating the NFL Combine stats and all that information and updated rankings after the NFL Combine, guys. So if you do want to get a piece of this, go to flogfantasy.com/land. Once again, the best place to support what Zach and I are doing here. Let's get straight into my next player. This next player is genuinely one of my favorite players that I've been trying to acquire everywhere. He is somebody that I truly believe is completely undervalued, that I truly believe a lot of the fantasy community just always brushes him under the rug, and that's at the tight end position. That is Cole Kmet. Let me just remind you that Cole Kmet has been a top 10 tight end the past 2 years. He finished as a tight end 8 this year and tight end 10 last year. And this is what Justin Fields, with a lot of people that don't believe in him. Now the Bears have the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. Okay? That's just my information I'm giving you before I even get into my take. 73 receptions, 90 targets, just over 700 yards, 6 touchdowns, tight end 8, averaging 10.7 points per game. Once again, this is an extremely exciting, low-risk, high-reward type of play. Maybe you're in a tight end premium. Maybe you had a Darren Waller that didn't work out. Maybe you just didn't have a tight end, had a tight end that you just don't like, and you want to boost your tight end position. I think this is a very, very underrated boost in that tight end position with, once again, low risk, high reward. This is a win-win in my personal opinion. If Justin Fields stays, we've seen the success the past 2 years, even with an elite wide receiver in DJ Moore. If Justin Fields goes, that means they are drafting Caleb Williams, who I think we can all agree that everyone in the fantasy community believes that Caleb Williams is better than Justin Fields, who they're comparing him to be, the next quote unquote Patrick Mahomes. He has a Patrick Mahomes-esque type of traits, right? Kmet was second in targets behind DJ Moore in 2023. Granted, they don't have another wide receiver on this team. Darnell Mooney just is not that guy. Kmet was first in targets on this team the year before without DJ Moore. He was the number one guy, and he was still the number two guy behind DJ Moore in targets and still finished as a top 10 tight end. Now, there is one thing I will address, because I think a lot of the argument would say, and a lot of the fantasy communities, maybe in the comments, you're probably saying this, but they have another pick in the top 10. They have the ninth pick in the NFL draft. I truly don't believe, genuinely don't believe, that the Bears are going to be able to draft another wide receiver at the ninth pick, respectfully. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. These are my top four players at the wide receiver position that I believe are worthy, respectfully to everyone else, are worthy to go in the top 10. Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. Sorry, I said four, I meant three. Those are my three wide receivers that I respectfully believe can go in the top 10 of the NFL draft. Yes, the Bears could potentially go there with Rome Odunze. We can all agree, everyone's saying Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals. Everyone's saying Malik Neighbors to the Chargers or the Giants. Now, the next team that could potentially go at the wide receiver position could potentially be the Tennessee Titans, could be the Atlanta Falcons, could be the Chicago Bears. I don't believe the Chicago Bears, once again, respectfully, go with Rome Odunze with all the other holes they have in this offense and or defense. I could be wrong, and maybe I'll have my foot in my mouth when this does happen. But I will raise my hand and say I could be wrong, and we have to come back and reassess. But if the Bears do get Rome Odunze at the 109, which I personally believe he'll fall if the Titans stay put at the with quarterback, if the Broncos trade up, then somebody else moves down. If the Vikings trade up and somebody else moves down, like a lot of things could potentially happen, then I'll come back and reassess and say I was wrong. But if that does not happen, then Kmet is the number two option on this team. Kmet is here to stay and is going to be getting an upgrade at the quarterback position. He is currently tied in 13 in the community for both Keep Trade Cut and the Flock fantasy community. At the moment, if you wanted to send a 208, just like a Jahan Dotson, who is getting an upgrade at the quarterback position and or staying put with Justin Fields, this is a great deal for you. Once again, if you are struggling at the tight end position, maybe you have a Dalton Schultz and you're not necessarily sure where he's going to be. Maybe you have a Darren Waller who has been struggling with injuries. Maybe you have a TJ Hawkinson and you're not necessarily sure when he's going to be ready to come back into the 2024 season. Kmet is instantly going to be getting either an upgrade at the quarterback position or sticking with Justin Fields, where he's finished as a top 10 tight end for the past 2 years. Once again, low risk, high reward, a guy being swept under the rug, I feel like, for the past 2 years, and he keeps going late in dynasty startups, somebody that you should be trying to acquire right now. All right, guys, and my last player on this list, this is more for win now teams. Maybe you need that extra running back room. Maybe you need that extra player that can take you to the ship. Yes, it's a running back, hint, hint. I think a lot of people aren't going to like this, but I think there's still a lot of juice. I think we've seen very misled and understood player this past year, and that is Derrick Henry. Last year was not what we all expected, right? I had Derrick Henry really high in my redraft rankings. I thought he was going to be this guy, but there was a lot of different things that we saw from this team. Right, a lot of different factors that were hindering him from being the king that we all know and love. Now, one of the biggest arguments is that Derrick Henry's efficiency was one of the worst of his career this year in 2023. I completely agree. I personally don't believe that's based off of his personal production. I think a lot of other factors, kind of came into play when you looked at Derrick Henry and how he has functioned as a player, right? I mean, he's functioned on volume. He just did not get that this year. My first caveat when it comes down to that argument, when a lot of people say his inefficiency, he actually had one of the worst offensive line he had in his career. Last year, the Tennessee Titans offensive line was literally the worst in the NFL according to PFF, ranked 32nd in the NFL. They gave up the most sacks with 49 sacks. It was terrible for Derrick Henry and this quarterback. Obviously, Will Levis and Ryan Tannehill. One of the biggest reasons, if I'm not mistaken, Ryan Tannehill got injured. Okay, the second, they were already planning on opening up the passing game with Will Levis. Coming into this year, they have already prefaced this year coming in saying that we're going to be throwing the ball a lot more. We're going to be trying new things because they knew Derrick Henry was coming, wasn't the key to their new offer, wasn't the key to them winning a championship. They got DeAndre Hopkins, who, if you sign DeAndre Hopkins, you're not going to give the ball to Derrick Henry 30 times. You're not. You're going to be passing the ball to DeAndre Hopkins, who is just as good as Derrick Henry, both in their prime and even when they're older, in my personal opinion. So I think those are some of the things that I think that were really disappointing. Despite all that, he did finish as a top 8 running back, but it's still a disappointment, but there is still significant amount of hope and upside when I think of Derrick Henry going into the 2024 season. Now, this whole video I've been prefacing saying that try to acquire these guys before the NFL draft or the NFL free agency. And Derrick Henry is somebody that you genuinely have a couple of weeks until free agency is officially open. And Derrick Henry could potentially be finding a new home sooner rather than later. And once he does find a new home, his value is going to skyrocket. At the moment, right, he is valued between the 209 in the second round of your rookie drafts. Now, you're probably a contender. Maybe you won last year and you have the 212. Maybe you have the 212 and the 312. Can you package the 212 and the 312 to get someone like a Derrick Henry? Maybe you need to throw in something a little bit more sweeter from your 2025 picks, right? Because we have heard the rumors of Derrick Henry going to a contending team, to going to the following teams. The Baltimore Ravens, who we've seen have been a run-heavy offense. We saw the successful Gus Edwards. What about the Cincinnati Bengals? Do they let Joe Mixon walk and go for someone like Derrick Henry? Joe Mixon, if I'm not mistaken, the past 2 years led the league in touches within the 5-yard line, 5 and 10-yard line in the red zone. The Browns, what's going to happen with Nick Chubb? Kareem Hunt only signed a 1-year deal. That's a run-heavy offense. The Chiefs, I would say the Chiefs is not the best landing spot, but still. And one last landing spot for Derrick Henry that will be really, really intriguing is the Chargers. With Jim Harbaugh there, that everything's going to change completely. Justin Herbert, you get Derrick Henry in the backfield to tote the ball 25-plus times, Jim's going to run that man to the ground. No doubt about it. We've seen it with Blake this past year. Blake Corum at Michigan, right? According to the community, Derrick Henry is RB32 at the moment on Keep Trade Cut and RB28 in the community. Once again, once you hear that report on your phone saying Derrick Henry was signed to the Baltimore Ravens, do you believe his value is still at the 209? Absolutely not. He's going to be going, in my personal opinion, from the 202 to the 205, 206. By that time, it's too late. By that time, you want to keep those top picks because those are some players that you like. Those are the Lamb McConkeys. Those are the Adonai Mitchells. Those are potentially the Michael Penix, the Bo Nix, the J.J. McCarthy's that could potentially fall in the second round of your rookie drafts. You don't want that. So if you can pay for Derrick Henry sooner rather than later before he does get signed to a contending team, or once again, insert any team that is going to give him those touches or somewhere remotely around those touches, that value is not going to be there. And you're not going to be wanting to pay an early second for Derrick Henry when the time comes, guys. So once again, Derrick Henry, Jahan Dotson, Kmet, and Wan'Dale Robinson are my 4 low-risk, high-reward players that you should be buying as soon as possible. Let me know what you like. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let's have a conversation in the comments. And as always, It's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.